I think we're done with Howie Roseman slander. Look, has he been perfect? No, of course not. But he is one of the best, if not the best GM in the NFL.
You want passion, you want fire at 7:20 in the morning. You don't coffee when you're Marc Farzetta. I am shocked, my friend. I'm shocked there's no Fanatic hat on you today. There's no Phillies attire on. Are you waiting the day for all this?
I'm trying to take it all into consideration and trying to temper my expectations. I'm trying to pace myself because we're essentially having, 3 game days? We got the Phillies tomorrow, Phillies Saturday, Eagles game day Sunday, and then we're going to have a Thursday night football game in the middle of all this. Things are going to be crazy. So trying to pace myself at this point.
You know, I thought my sister was going to be doing victory laps yesterday. So I get a text from her around 9 o'clock. She goes, I'm going to the World Series. And I'm like, wait, you're actually like, wait, you're going? Are you going the same game as I am? I'm a season ticket holder, so I didn't have to worry about the raffle and all that. She goes, no, I won. And like people were so stressed out on Twitter. It was kind of funny. Like they're like, I didn't get an email. I thought this was gonna be the email. I'm like, you probably got rejected because she got her tickets and she's all fired up. She didn't care where she was sitting.
You know what? I'm glad to hear that somebody got their tickets because I heard, obviously that was a very difficult thing for a lot of people with so many people trying to get those World Series tickets. And I'm trying to get on that secondary market. I regret not being able to go in 2008 or 2009, a little busy. But this time around, I'd love to be able to make it down there.
Yeah, that's how I was, Mark. So I was in college. I was at Penn State. And as much as I wanted to drive home for a lot of those games, it was that time of year where, you got midterms, you got all this stuff going on. And I'm like, you know what? Can't make that 3-hour drive every single day. I'll enjoy watching from home. And I got to go to the parade. So I was good.
Yeah, that's the thing. That parade, I'd heard it was the first one I ever got to experience. I'm sure the same thing for you. It was better than anything anyone ever told me about, from the 70s Flyers to the 83, the 1980 Phillies. It was the best thing. The 83 Sixers, that parade exceeded all expectations. I can't wait till we have another one courtesy of the Phillies.
I'll tell you, another team that may be giving us 2 parades in, 4 months? The Philadelphia Eagles after the Robert Quinn move. I just want to hear your initial thoughts on it.
My initial thoughts are, I think we're done with Howie Roseman slander. Look, has he been perfect? No, of course not. But he is one of the best, if not the best GM in the NFL, at least the NFL. Potentially, if you look at just Philadelphia sports in general, Dave Dombrowski might be giving him a run for his money. President of Baseball Ops, GM, whatever you want to call it, putting a team together, having final say on putting a team together. Howie Roseman's up there with the best of them. And he's already got a Super Bowl in his back pocket. And I love how we act like we got 10 of those in our back pocket. This move is just the latest move of Howie Roseman fleecing another general manager and another team. Look, the Bears obviously wanted to move on from him. They got a 4th-round pick, which is not nothing. But the fact that the Eagles are paying next to nothing for the services of Robert Quinn, who are going back, by the way, who's going back into the system that he had so much success with a year ago with 18.5 sacks, and with the rotation on this defensive line, I don't think he's going to be asked to do nearly as much as he was asked to do in Chicago. I see him doing nothing but doing very well. I don't think this is going to be a bust. I don't think there's going to be an overhyped move. You look at a 4th-round trade that they made a couple of years ago, Jannard Avery. He didn't even break onto the scene, if you even want to call it breaking onto the scene, until last year where we saw him regularly. This isn't that move. I think Robert Quinn's going to come in here and give you everything that he has left in the tank, which I think will be significant enough to be an impact player on that defensive line.
I said straight up, like, this is a Super Bowl winning move. This is a guy I know for a fact that Kansas City Chiefs wanted. They wanted Robert Quinn. They did not get him. Now, everybody in Kansas City is like, okay, now what? Like, one of our top competitors to win the Super Bowl just got better. Now what do we do? And there are other pass rushers on the market, but to me, I don't think Brian Burns is available. I just don't think he's available. So you got to go sell for a guy. This isn't selling, by the way. You got to go get guys like Robert Quinn here. The Eagles got that.
Look, if I told you before the season you're going to trade Derek Barnett for Robert Quinn, you're pretty happy. That's essentially what you have done when you've upgraded your roster with Quinn.
That's what I love about this move. And I keep thinking to myself, you know what? They might not be done. I still think they kind of need maybe another safety in there, but that's hard to find, like safety depth. I mean, that could be anybody. Like people like to rip on Kayvon Wallace. He is what he is. Like, he's in the system. He's probably better than anybody you bring in at this point, unfortunately. But running back is something you can improve on, especially in the pass catching game. I think Kareem Hunt to them is very realistic.
Yeah, that's a name that keeps on coming around. And Howie, of course, got a pretty damn good running back in their Super Bowl run of 2017 when they traded for Jay Ajayi, and that turned out to work out very well for the Philadelphia Eagles. And that was after they already addressed it in free agency by bringing in LeGarrette Blount. They had an undrafted rookie that year named Corey Clement, who actually had a pretty damn good Super Bowl as well. Kareem Hunt would change things up tremendously for this Eagles backfield. And Miles Sanders, I know he had a little bit of a down game last 2 weeks ago now before the bye, but Kenny Gainwell has not had the breakout sophomore season that I hoped he would have. And if the Eagles can go out there and get a veteran pass catcher out of the backfield, I think they're going to jump on that opportunity. So in talking to guys like Adam Schefter about this for a while, Eagles are always in it when it comes to big trades. They'll kick the tires on just about everybody. They kicked the tires on Christian McCaffrey. I don't know how much they were serious with the offer that they put in there, because they certainly got blown out of the water by the San Francisco 49ers. But the Eagles are always going to be in on it. So if Kareem Hunt really is out there, really is available, the Eagles are going to be in on those sweepstakes, and I would expect them to assume he's going to be a little bit more of the bargain price than Christian McCaffrey was.
Yeah, and I was talking to my Buffalo friends about Christian McCaffrey. They're like, they kind of felt the Bills and the Eagles did the same thing. Like, they called, they wanted to see how much it was. Right. I think the Bills were more willing to put their first-round pick than the Eagles were. But then, like you said, San Francisco just blew them out of the water, and I think the Bills were like, well, thank God we didn't do that,
Yes, exactly. For a running back, look, Chris McCaffrey's great, and even though he plays receiver and running back and all that stuff, I don't think the Eagles were going to be tipping the scales too much with the draft picks they were going to add to that deal. I think they were, like you said, blown out of the water when it came to what San Francisco did.
Yeah, I think the Bills right now are probably thinking the same thing as the Eagles. Well, what do we need to do to get Kareem Hunt? And I know Cleveland said they'd take a fourth for him, but let's be honest, they can probably mooch a third if these two teams get into a bidding war.
Yeah, exactly. It took the words right out of my mouth. They're going to pit the Bills, the Eagles, and probably at least two other teams against one another and get the best possible value. That's exactly what John Lynch did with McCaffrey. And now you look at a guy like Kareem Hunt, who can change the landscape of a backfield still and be a huge threat coming out of the backfield. I think the teams are going to be willing to part ways with more than people are expecting at this point. And that's where the Eagles might lose out. But for whatever reason, I don't know if Howie is just a really good hypnotist and just knows how to get people to do what he wants. But whatever it is, if he can work that Howie magic, make those Howie moves, then you might see you might see Kareem Hunt in that backfield.
I think what he did with the Bears was, and I heard a lot of the Bears radios talk about this. They were shocked they got a fourth for Robert Quinn because his value was not that high. Like, if this was July, August, I think you had to give up the second for him. And they were like, okay, now we're lucky we get a day 3 pick. Well, they did. They got a fourth. And I think Bears fans are like, okay, we'll take this for a guy that was not going to be on our team next year.
Yeah, I look at it like this. I always like to say numbers never lie, but they sure as hell deceive. And I think Robert Quinn is a perfect example of that. I mean, you look at 1 sack, you look at only 3 quarterback hits, you look at 2 tackles for loss this year, down from the 18.5 sacks that he had a year ago. And it all comes down to system. It all comes down to scheme. It all comes down to who is around you right now. He was the oldest member of their defense in Chicago, 32 years old. They had a 5th-round pick that they're pretty high on right now. Name escapes me. Dominique. I can't remember his last name. Yeah, and they want to get him more incorporated in the defense as well. But for me, he was still being used more than any other defensive lineman that they had, but only 68% of the snaps. You compare that to the 64% of the snaps that you'll see a guy like Josh Sweat play, or the 43% of the snaps that you'll see a guy like Brandon Graham play. He is going to be asked to be a big contributor. It'll be more of a throwback to that. Man, Vic Fangio's name just keeps coming up here. Be more of a throwback to more of a Vic Fangio style defense. And I think what the Eagles are going to use him for will be more along the lines of what Connor Barwin was used for when he was coming to the Eagles, to be used in that 3-4 under type of scheme. So that, to me, is going to jump out and kind of what will lead to his production and more or less a rejuvenation, if you will, of those numbers when he comes here to Philadelphia.
If Jonathan Gannon does happen to get hired as a head coach, did they just promote Denard Wilson, or do you think with Robert Quinn around, and again, they can keep him around if they want to after this year, even though there's no guarantee money on the table, and Vic Fangio's been around that building. Do you think they just say, hey, Vic, you want to be a defensive coordinator again?
Yes, I absolutely think we are seeing a little bit more, whether Jonathan Gannon wants to admit it or not. And look, it could be the personnel is obviously better than it was a year ago. But Jonathan Gannon has coached this year, called plays this year, like he's got a little bit of a fire lit under his ass. And we didn't see that last year. This defense has been more aggressive. We have seen more blitzes. I feel like I could count on one hand the amount of times I saw either Alex Singleton or TJ Edwards blitz up the middle to go after the quarterback. And I feel like this year already we've seen that at least 10 or 15 times. Like that is a much more aggressive game plan and scheme. And I think that comes from Vic Fangio's influence. Now, schematically, I think that comes from Vic Fangio's influence. And I also think job security-wise, that comes from Vic Fangio's presence as a consultant, if you will, for this Eagles defense. Because if you're Jonathan Gannon and you've already sat down to have interviews, that's a good thing for you as a head coach, obviously, to get those interviews as a head coach around the league. But also, the Eagles got to be thinking, this guy could be gone. If he's gone, I want to make sure I have his replacement. Also, if this guy fails, I want to make sure I have his replacement right here next to me. And that's Vic Fangio still being there, flirting with this Eagles front office, helping with scheme, helping as a consultant. I think that is something that Jonathan Gannon has taken notice of, because it's never a good thing to have that guy standing there over your shoulder. And that's what I think Vic Fangio is doing. So they most likely, if Gannon gets hired, or if this team and this defense has an epic collapse after the bye week, which I do not foresee, either way, the Eagles have someone they feel like they could elevate to put back on the sidelines to run this defense.
This team basically admitted, hey, we got Vic Gannon on borrowed time here. He's a rental. And
okay.
They clearly think he's going to be a head coach. Maybe it's next year, maybe not. I think if the Eagles got another year out of Jonathan Gannon, they'd be thrilled. But I want to look at this team overall. And yesterday, this was the big debate. Could the Eagles beat the Chiefs and the Bills? I said no. I've changed my tune tremendously, because this is the type of move that gets you to beat Kansas City. This is the type of move that gets you to beat Buffalo.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's an over-the-top type of move, and it's done by a team that is 6-0. And this move, I think, is a great metaphor for, I think, the entire Eagles attitude. Jason Kelce set the bar before a game was even played when he was asked about just being comfortable. And he talked about how comfort is really poison. And Jalen Hurts talked about the rat poison that's out there when it comes to buying into hype that surrounds a roster and surrounds what just a team is on paper before the season starts. And Jason Kelce talked about how they have to look at wins as if they're losses. They have to critique those wins as if they're losses, as if the mistakes are just as big in a win as they are a loss, because eventually it could cost you a game or two or three or a season even. So Jason Kelce coming out, setting the bar, let me know that this team is going to be hungry no matter what. And they have backed that up every step of the way. They beat the Lions. What do you hear from Jonathan Gannon after that game? You hear how they did not play. They did not finish that game. And he's right. He didn't lie to us. He wasn't BSing us. Everyone who watched that first game of the season knew they didn't finish that game properly. They continue to go on to a 6-0 record to start the season, going into the bye, and all you hear about is how they want to work on things. You have a quarterback that is on the verge of signing a franchise deal with this team, and he doesn't even want to hear about the record. This team is not satisfied, and for the front office to go out there, and Howie Roseman to go out there and make this move now at 6-0 shows you how unsatisfied, how unimpressed they are with themselves at being 6-0 to this point this season. And I think they're going to improve to 7-0 because I think they're going to win convincingly over the Pittsburgh Steelers. So it just shows you how much they want to make sure they're over the top. So when it comes time to face another playoff team, when it comes time to play in the playoffs, when it comes time to hopefully play in the Super Bowl, they're going to have the best possible roster they can have, and a team playing as great as they can play at the right time as well.
I think the best thing for the Eagles is how good their division is. There's only 2 6-win teams in the NFL. They're in the NFC East. Like, if they slip up and the Giants win, Giants are tied for first with them. If they slip up again, Dallas is right in the race. Like, you have to keep going. You're not up 3 games in this division. And I think that's what causes Howie Roseman to do these moves that he's making. Because, look, we know we're a Super Bowl team, no doubt about that. Let's make sure we are in the best position we can to go to the Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm. It's wild, man. You look at this roster, You look at the way the team talks about themselves and how hungry they are for more. Like, they're the hungriest 6-0 team I've ever seen. Like, even when T.O. was here, there was a feeling, I think, in the fan base, a little bit with the organization, maybe of, we got this. Like, we're going to the NFC Championship game is just going to be the beginning of bedlam, to use Scott Fransky's word, right? When you look at it like that, this team is a lot hungrier than that 6-0 team because this team has a lot more to prove. Donovan McNabb was an established quarterback, franchise guy, had been to the NFC Championship games, had won playoff games, won regular season games. T.O. was already a Hall of Famer at that point, 32 years old, solidified his career. We all know that. But this team has a lot more to prove than that other 6-0 team, right? And when you look at this team with a little bit of that chip on their shoulder, that's where I think they're really going to be put over the edge. It's not just a talented roster. That can be talked about what's on paper. But on the field, they play the game like they still have a lot to prove. And when you have kept things so close in what was supposed to be the worst division in football, the NFC East has become the toughest. And that's without Dak Prescott for, 5 games? And the Giants have revamped themselves with Brian Dable running things there. Mike Kafka, former Eagles backup quarterback there out of, Northwestern, I believe it was. Like, you have these guys coming in there in New York that are changing things around. Daniel Jones doesn't look like the same guy anymore. He actually looks like an NFL quarterback for the first time in his career. But it's all these things taking place in the NFC East right now that are making the Eagles, as you said, continue to push, continue to strive. Because the minute you lose a game, nobody gives a damn about that undefeated record anymore, because the undefeated record doesn't mean anything. The only thing it means is that you happen to be 1 game better than the Giants, 2 games better than the Dallas Cowboys maybe at some point. That's what you're facing right now. So the Eagles got to keep on pushing, whether that's in the front office, Kareem Hunt, as you mentioned, or that's just having that chip on their shoulder that they've had really throughout this entire year, because it is that close in the NFC East.
This is what I thought was interesting. I'm glad you mentioned 04, because they started 7-0. They had a big win over Baltimore, and I was like, okay, when are they going to lose? When are they going to lose? And then they played Pittsburgh, who just beat undefeated New England. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, this is the litmus test. This is how good this team actually is. And they got blown out of the water. That's one of the worst football games I ever watched. Navatio arguing on the sideline. Jerome Bettis finds the foul. I remember before that game, Deuce Staley wasn't going to play. I'm like, oh, man, they got shot now. They got shot. Deuce isn't here to just wreck their season. Yeah, and then Jerome Bettis beats him to the ground. The McNabb plays terrible too. I thought that was the 04 team's reality check. Like, you know what? We can't take a week off here. I don't know if this team has that content mentality in them. Like you said, from the front office down. It's Jalen Hurts isn't going to allow it. Jason Kelsey ain't going to allow that. They are going to treat the Pittsburgh Steelers like it's the Super Bowl. They're going to treat the Houston Texans like it's the Super Bowl. So I got to ask you, Marc Farzetta, when the hell does this team lose?
If you haven't seen it yet, how do you predict it, right? I mean, you would think that there's going to be some kind of a letdown game. And you might look at the schedule and say, oh, there could be letdown games. Oh, they could get a reality check against, the Giants or the Cowboys again. They could get a reality check down the line there. But, ultimately, the Eagles in their minds, which I think is what makes them so special, the Eagles in their minds are not 6-0. They're 1-0 because they're only looking at the previous game. And as soon as that game's done, they take that in for the, for the day, and then they move on to the next one. And I think it's so important. I think this is why Jalen Hurts doesn't want to talk about undefeated. And it's not because when they were, 2-5, no one wanted to talk about the record. It's not because of that. It's because the minute you start talking about undefeated, the season becomes no room for error. It becomes next to impossible, especially in a 17-game season. If you talk about an undefeated season, it's a huge entity. But if you talk about it week by week, you could win that game this week. You're not going to be thinking about the game 3 weeks from now, because that is where you start thinking about being undefeated and for how long you could stay undefeated. The Eagles have a season every week, and that's what I think makes them special. They have the right mindset and the right approach to this team. I will say this. I have had throughout his entire career, Daniel Jones, I've had zero respect for Daniel Jones. And a part of me, even with Brian Dable coming in there and revamping things and Wink Martindale helping that defense as much as he has to this point, I can't bring myself to respect Daniel Jones or a team that is quarterbacked by Daniel Jones. And they played great, credit where credit's due. But when they play the Eagles, I still can't take them seriously. I still have to look at the Eagles as if they're the far superior team despite their records. And Daniel Jones and the Giants have done things that certainly warrant respect this year. But when the Eagles face them, I think that goes out the window.
I always say this as a coach, and I say this to a lot of Giants fans. Just someone who coaches basketball, someone who has dabbled into coaching football.
Okay.
You know when you're better than your opponent. You just know when you're watching the tape. That's how it feels to me when the Eagles play the Giants. It's like, yeah, the Giants are 6-1, but the Eagles got a mismatch here, the Eagles got a mismatch here, and you got to exploit that. I don't think Giants fans realize that. They're like, we're going to coach your way past you. Yes, that does work. That does work. But, and look, I respect the Giants a heck of a lot what they're doing this year. They beat Seattle. I'm going to say, look, you know what? They're contenders. I mean, I think they are anyway, but they beat Seattle. They're probably going to be 9-1 going to that Thanksgiving showdown with Dallas. But I keep looking at when they play Dallas. I think Dallas is significantly better than them. And it showed. Like, Brian Dable could coach his way, and he had a good game coaching that night. But I feel like that's how it would be right now with the Eagles and the Giants, especially now that you got Robert Quinn.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And just looking at the Eagles schedule, I mean, you asked the question, when do they lose? Just to look down the line here, Steelers, Texans, Commanders again, Colts, and then they host the Packers on Sunday Night Football. I mean, they got a hell of a run here on the table, man. The Packers seem to do this every year, and that would mean they'd be what, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, or 10-0 going into that Packers game, possibly. Could you imagine, Jeff? That game that I look at, the Packers seem to have these struggles with Aaron Rodgers. They seem like they can't get anything right, and they get another big test this weekend coming up against Buffalo. I think that's the Sunday night game this week. But they have this big test coming up here. The Packers seem to struggle, and then they right the ship, and they're a team you can't mess with. That might be a game that the Eagles, even though they host it, might have trouble with. But I look at this schedule, and you even play the Bears a little, later on this season, and in Chicago, it's tough to look at this schedule and go, that right there is going to be the loss, because this team doesn't take anything lightly. You might have that one game where no matter what you do, what you think, how you prepare, how well you're playing going into it, you have that game where you just can't do anything right. It's a crapshoot for me when you look at the schedule and say, what game's that going to be? I honestly, I wish I could tell you, because I'd bet a lot of money on that game. But I just can't look at the schedule with the way this Eagles team has played and how they've had the approach to these games so far this season and go, oh, no, that game against the Colts, that'll be the letdown game in Indianapolis against Frank Reich. Like, I can't even look at it like that, because that team just does not look like they're doing well right now, and especially making the change at quarterback. Look, divisional games can always be tricky. I can't nail down one game that I look at and go, oh, that's the game right there that the Eagles are going to have trouble with.
Yeah, I mean, Tennessee could be the game, but again, they're at home. So right. I don't know. Which of these games do you think gets flexed to primetime? It's got to be the Giants, right?
I would think the Giants game there at the one in December or the end of the season?
I think the ones that they both might be, quite honestly, because it all depends what they are and what they're going for. But I definitely think the first one's going to get flexed.
Yeah, there's a good chance that happened right now. It's a 1 p.m. game on Fox. The difficult thing with flexing, and this is coming from someone who I worked 11 years on Sunday Night Football behind the scenes there, and I heard a lot of conversations about that. Lawyers get in a room and they fight it out because every team wants to, every network knows what the marquee game is. And if you're Fox, that might be one of the protected games you place on the season. If you're NBC, you certainly want to fight for that. There's only been one exception, and it was when was it the Broncos and Chiefs, I think, were both undefeated. And I think that game was scheduled to be a 1 o'clock in the afternoon game. And it was the only example I know of the NFL stepping in and saying, this game has to be in prime time. Because both those teams, I think, were 7-0, 8-0 at the time. And the game got flexed to prime time. And I think the trade-off was whatever game it was, Fox or CBS, probably CBS. They said, all right, well, we're going to get the first pick then of a playoff game. So there's a trade-off that happens. There's a bargaining chip there. Definitely a possibility that it gets traded, or that it gets flexed into a Sunday night game. But I know Fox would fight hard to keep that matchup.
I know this too, just from being a CBS employee. A lot of people were like, why aren't Jason Bills on Sunday Night Football this year? I'm like, because CBS was not letting that happen. That's the bottom line. It's their game. It's
right.
Fox isn't getting the special cross flex, and the regular season game was on NBC last year. That's a game you protect. Same with Bengals. Like, you protect a lot of Bengals games. It's Mark, you know how this works. NBC's like, we want that game, we want that game, we want that game, we want that game.
Mm-hmm. They want it all. They want, and rightfully so. Yeah, that's how you do your job. Good for you. But the NFL also has to consider all their TV partners at the same time. So it's not.
They're all paying $1 billion at this point.
Exactly. They're not just throwing darts at a board. All right. They have this pretty well planned out.
Can you imagine, though, like how the Eagles season's going? Now, I'm not ripping Amazon here, but can you imagine, like, if Eagles Giants were on Amazon
Prime? It hasn't started off well. Let's put it that way. But I think here's what I've learned about football. If it's your team and not just your fantasy team, you don't give a damn who's got it. You just want it. And when it comes to an Eagles-Giants game or an Eagles-Cowboys game or anything like that for a Thursday night game, people are gonna tune in. A lot of people in this area anyway. They just turn down the TV anyway, and they turn on Merrill and Mike, obviously. But for me, it's just starting out. I know a lot of people on that crew that are working their asses off to make sure it's the best product possible, and I think it'll only improve.
I'm going to say this, too, about Thursday Night Football. We haven't had some good games this year. I think tonight might change the tune a bit. You got Tom Brady, you got Lamar Jackson, you got Baltimore 4-3, who I think is a lot better than 4-3, personally. They've blown games. I don't think Tampa's going to be out of it because of how bad that division is, but the Ravens have a real opportunity here to just bury the Buccaneers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, they certainly do. They have an opportunity now that Gus Edwards looks like he's back and he's going to be helping their run game. Lamar Jackson, I still don't think he has played his best game yet. My thing is, though, with the Ravens, I mean, this was a team forever since its inception was built on defense, and their defense has looked lost. And they got to be a quick strike offense if they're going to make up for a very weak defense. And Lamar Jackson has struggled with that. He has missed Marquise Brown, obviously, Hollywood Brown, who's out there in Arizona now. Their whole team needs a little bit of a step up right now. And I don't know if it's a kick in the ass from their head coach. John Harbaugh has done a wonderful job down there, of course, down there in Baltimore. But, man, they have had a lot of struggles that we're not used to seeing from them, especially on the defensive side of the ball. I know Lamar Jackson's going to steal all the headlines as an MVP and how dynamic a player he is. But, man, I'm not used to looking south of 95 and seeing a defense struggle the way they have this year. But Tampa Bay and with their struggles as well might be just what the doctor ordered for a Baltimore team.
It's weird too because the last couple games Lamar struggled and they've still been able to win because he seems to make the play or two he needs to make, even though the box score doesn't look pretty. And I had the rank 7 teams for 7 weeks I think have a shot at the Super Bowl. Baltimore's one of them because you think about it, they don't blow those leads. They're 7-0 right now. Mm-hmm. I mean, they're a good team. So I'm looking at it as who, in your mind, Farzy, who are the Eagles' biggest competitors for the Super Bowl?
Okay, Chiefs, Bills. Let's get that away. You're talking just all throughout the NFL, right?
Yeah, throughout the NFL. We're going crazy here.
I know Deebo Samuel has a hamstring injury, and we're waiting to see what happens there for this weekend. But I think San Francisco, Jimmy Garoppolo is just consistent. He does what everyone says. He doesn't lose you games and kind of helps you win games. He's a glorified game manager, right? Yeah. I think there's a better version of the Packers than what we have seen so far. It comes down to quarterback play. If you have that elite quarterback, you're going to win games. You have a balanced team, you're going to win games. The Eagles are certainly all of that right now, which is why I think they are a favorite right now to at least make it to an NFC championship game at the very least. But when you look around the NFL, Chiefs, Bills, competing with the Eagles for that spot, I think San Francisco is going to be up there. I think Cincinnati certainly is going to be up there. I mean, the AFC is just stacked compared to what the NFC is right now. And the Cowboys, with their defense and how dynamic they can be, I think they're a team that you have to take seriously. If you're being honest with yourself, the fact that they did so well with Cooper Rush as their backup quarterback, as their starting quarterback, with Dak Prescott being out, I think that shows you that their defense in the time that their offense struggles can rise to the occasion and handle their business. When it comes to what Trayvon Diggs brings there, Micah Parsons, DeMarcus Lawrence, all those guys, they bring a lot to the table right there. And we don't even talk about a guy like Leighton Vander Esch and what he brings to the table as a linebacker for them as well. So you look at those teams right now, I think those are the biggest competitors right now when it comes to the Eagles attempting to win the biggest game they could possibly win for the second time in 5 years. That, to me, I think those are the guys that really pose the biggest threat to the Philadelphia Eagles.
All right, I'm putting the apple in your head, top of your head, about to shoot the bow.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, okay. How far do you think the Eagles go this year, right now, with this team?
I'd say their base is the NFC Championship game.
Okay.
I mean, you look at Yeah, wait, say that again?
That's more than fair.
I mean, you mentioned, Robert Quinn coming to a defense that has the 7th most sacks in the NFL already, and they've only played 6 games because they've already taken their bye week, obviously. You're throwing that into the mix already with a guy like Hassan Reddick, already with a guy like Josh Sweat and Brandon Graham, and already with the defensive tackles that we haven't even mentioned. This is a stacked defense. Safety is a huge question mark right now, and I do think CD Deuce will only get better as the season goes on. I think Marcus Epps has stuck his head in some plays around the football that we weren't expecting him to really be around to this point in the season. So I think that secondary will continue to improve. And you're talking about a secondary that already has cornerbacks making interceptions for this team and forcing turnovers. This is a totally different defense than what we saw a year ago when it comes to sacks, when it comes to turnovers, a totally different defense. But offensively speaking, I don't see them getting worse. I see Jalen Hurts improving. You could talk about time and time again of defenses figuring out Jalen Hurts. Oh, look, they figured out Jalen Hurts. How the hell do you figure this guy out? Oh, make him throw the football. Well, he's done a pretty damn good job of throwing the football this year, been pretty damn accurate. Oh, what are we going to do when we get him off his mark? You got to rush him. He'll make mistakes. He hasn't made those mistakes. He's played really smart. I have seen, and you can talk about this in basketball with a guy like Tyrese Maxey. You can talk about it on the other side with a guy like Ben Simmons, for instance, and not improving in the offseason. But Jalen Hurts, I think, has reset how we view offseason workouts. Ben Simmons shot it down and made nobody have faith. But Jalen Hurts posting the videos of throwing to A.J. Brown, of throwing to Devontae Smith, of working out with his teammates, of putting in the offseason workout by going out to work out with a guy like Tom House in Southern California. He has reset the expectation for an athlete going into going into an off season with clear things to work on and coming out of that off season into the new season, showing the proof in the pudding that he put in the work. And to me, where that comes most is pre-snap reads. I've seen him look at the defense, shift to something that he thinks will be at least a safer play. He was almost guilty of that to a fault against the Arizona Cardinals with as many pre-snap reads where he went to bubble screens on those plays. But I have seen that more than anything on slant routes. When you see A.J. Brown or you see Devontae Smith make that quick cut to the middle of the line of scrimmage, or to the middle of the field to make that play, he is right there on the money every time with those throws. And that's not something we could say we saw a lot of throughout last year, throughout his first year as a starting quarterback. That, to me, has been the biggest improvement with Jalen Hurts. And you usually talk about leadership when a guy has 1 year under his belt. They've been talking about Jalen Hurts being a leader throughout his entire career, and he's already had that, so that didn't need any improvement. So it comes down to pre-snap reads for me with Jalen Hurts, and it comes down to accuracy on those slant patterns. The deep ball, you've also seen a little bit more this year. He's thrown that with some great accuracy as well. Not as much as I think some people want to see. Hopefully you'll see an opportunity here to take the top off the defense against the Steelers. But I really think it all comes down to how well he has played as a quarterback this year and the weapons that he has used. If they do go out and help him, maybe they get that Kareem Hunt fella, then you're only going to see this offense improve even more. But I see an Eagles team that is a complete team that is taking care of the football, taking the football away defensively, and I see a team that's going to go out there and at least make the NFC Championship game.
That's the thing. I have to say this about Jalen Hurts. He's the only quarterback to have a 100 passer rating against Cowboys defense this year. That's all you have to say about what Jalen Hurts has been able to do. What he's doing has been tremendous, and I'll leave you with this, Farzy. The old Dick Vermeil saying, character is always tested when you're up against it. He had to face that as an 18-year-old kid when Tua Tagovailoa came in and basically stole a national championship game from him. And he's been a leader ever since. I just love what Jalen Hurts has been able to do. Just got to get one final thought of you before I can let you go here.
Yeah, what do you got?
Hey, just overall, what is going to happen this weekend? What is your prediction for Phillies Astros and the Eagles game?
Eagles are going to win by 2 touchdowns over the Steelers. So let me just get that out of the way. I think it's going to be a 24-10 type of game, maybe a 31-10 type of game for the Eagles. As far as the World Series goes, I think they split in Houston. I think Nola takes game 1 in a shocker to most of the country against Justin Verlander. I think Nola takes game 1. I think Harper continues to stay hot. And here's how I approach this World Series. very rarely can you look at the sport of baseball because it's so individualized and say one guy's going to take over a game. A pitcher can do that, but on a daily basis, a guy in the lineup has to do that. I think Bryce Harper is that guy. Usually you can look at a sport like basketball and say, oh, the best player on the floor, he's going to win the game for the team, right? You can rarely do that in baseball when you're talking about a guy in the lineup, when you're talking about a position player. And Bryce Harper's that guy. And if you're I don't care how good you are, if you're Justin Verlander, if you're Farmer Valdez, for instance, you don't want the smoke that is Bryce Harper right now in the postseason. Bryce Harper, that swing was the swing of his life. This postseason run, this World Series, every swing, every play, every pitch is going to be that swing, that pitch, that moment of his life. That's what he is playing his whole career for, this moment right now, to be on the biggest stage. And he has an opportunity to go out there and show that he's not just going to be a postseason MVP, but a World Series MVP. And if he does that, this Phillies team is going to provide us yet another parade in Philadelphia.
All right, Mark. I'm loving it, my friend. Got to get you on in a couple weeks. I always enjoy having you on.
Always a pleasure, Jeff. Appreciate it, man.
That sounds great. Thanks, Mark. Have a good day.
You too. Go Birds, go Phils.